Welcome to Logistics Business Conversations, where we talk with key spokespeople in the logistics industry about topical issues. Hosted by Peter MacLeod, editor of Logistics Business magazine.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. My name is Peter MacLeod, and I welcome you all to this special edition of Logistics Business Conversations. Special? Yes, because this week I'm chatting with an old industry colleague of mine, one who's risen up to the pinnacle of the UK's logistics sector. It's Rob Fisher, CEO of the UK Materials Handling Association. Hi, Rob. Great to see you again.
Lovely to connect with you again. It's a bit like old times when we were SHD Logistics.
It is a bit like that. Although everything is digital these days, and it's fair to say that in your time in the industry, you've seen a lot of change. The changes in publishing is just one of them. So can you just quickly tell us, what was your first interface with the logistics sector professionally?
Wow. So that goes back probably to the middle 80s or late 80s when I actually started my career in publishing and exhibitions, working for a company called Turret Rye on a little magazine called SHD, selling classified ads at the back. And my mother was ever so impressed that I went full circle from doing that to about 20 years later taking over the publication as the publisher for the magazine, as well as running an event called IMHX.
Yeah, IMHX, of course. You know, we can mark ourselves how long we've been in the industry by how many IMHXs we've attended. Have you ever thought about how many you've been to?
I've been to all of them since 2001. It's its inception. So 2001, I was there as a media partner on the sidelines, helping to produce manufacturing orientated content at the show. 2004, I was there as a media partner again with a small stand. And 2007, I ended up somehow running the whole event. Yes, it's been a bit of a journey, and 2022 was my last outing as the group director for IMHX before I joined UKMHA in 2024.
Yeah, you can take the boy out of IMHX, but you can't take IMHX out of the boy. You're still involved, of course, as UKMHA. It's a joint venture, is that right?
Yes, yeah, we're very proud to partner with Informa Markets. The show's always been very unique insofar as it's half owned by the industry. The UKMHA and its predecessor BITA own 50% of the exhibition, which really gives us some valuable input into the direction and the focus that each event or each edition of IMHX takes. So there's lots of conversations going on in the background at the moment with the organisers as we shape up to the 2027 show.
Yeah, that's right. It'll come around soon before we know it. 2025 event was very good for us at Logistics Business. We had a little podcast recording booth and had a steady stream of candidates coming in to be grilled by yours truly. I'm not going to grill you too toughly today, Rob. I'm going to be gentle on you. I'm going to talk about some of the work that the UKMHA is doing and its implications for the wider logistics sector. So maybe just you can kick that off perhaps by telling me a little bit about UKMHA. You know, what does it mean to the industry? What does it represent?
Yeah, sure. So UKMHA came to life in 2022 when BITA and what was formerly the Forklift Truck Association merged to make one association, which from the outside looking in was a far more logical solution to having two associations that were treading on each other's toes a bit. And it gives us a lot more focus and energy and drive to really look after the needs of the materials handling industry in the UK. We represent the manufacturers of OEMs as well as of forklift truck dealerships and suppliers into the industry. So it's really that whole ecosystem around the forklift truck and the various touch points that it has within logistics operations. We also run something called the Safe User Group, which is there to provide practical guidance for anybody that has forklift trucks working within their business. And we fully get behind the National Forklift Safety Day campaign, which this year is taking place on June the 9th. And that really focuses around the safety aspects that are inherent with the type of equipment and vehicles that our members will supply into all industries across all sectors.
I remember either as BITA or FLTA, safety was always number one on the agenda. Where do you put it, and what work does UKMHA do in that area to enhance safety in the warehouse?
Yeah, I mean, it's a vitally important area. Unfortunately, the statistics are still alarmingly high when it comes to accidents and incidents within the workplace. The HSE hasn't recorded any hard facts for a number of, maybe over a decade. So we're now stepping in with our own reporting tool for near misses, accidents that occur within the workplace with forklift trucks involved primarily. That's something which we launched last year as part of National Forklift Safety Day. And there's a dedicated portal. So if anyone wants more information, please go to the National Forklift Safety Day website, where you can pick up information, tips and helps. We've always taken the view that safety has to be a holistic approach. So it's not just about putting the latest technology on your truck, whether that be AI recognition of pedestrians in the warehouse aisle, or whether it's proximity centres. There's no point just focusing on the operator. Really, it needs to be everybody that's working in and around that environment. Too many times we hear of instances where people are wearing a high-vis jacket and they're taking a rather blasé approach to, well, it's my cloak of invincibility. You know, everyone should be able to see me because I'm wearing a high vis, but not looking at the practical things like keeping into the appropriate walkways, not taking shortcuts across the warehouse, being aware of the environment. And more we're trying to push the message to anyone that's working in or around a forklift truck that they should be making their employees aware of their responsibilities. And going back to IMHX, we hosted a fabulous mock trial, which, having run events for so many years, it was one of those where we had an audience of close to 60. I think only 2 people left before the end of the mock trial. And you could see people visually shaking and going white as the trial progressed, because it started those trigger points of, if the HSE ever do come in and investigate an accident within our site, have we really got everything prepared? Can we produce the documentation and demonstrate that the right training and risk assessments and everything else has been in place?
Do you think there was a question of people looking at that thinking, what, you mean I could go to prison for that?
There definitely was that oh my God moment. And the fact that we had Claire Bottle, who is the CEO of UKWA, as the person being prosecuted, and Claire is an experienced practitioner when it comes to operating within the materials handling environment. And you could see sort of, they weren't pulling back on any punches, the prosecution team. And I think there were some really big marquee moments in that trial when it came to the size of prosecution, which is dependent on the size of the business that you're operating and the severity of the accident, but also where that culpability lies as well. Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. We put it into 3 segments on the National Forklift Safety Day website, so it's there for all to view. It's not gated, and there's lots of tips and hints that people can take away from it.
So, Rob, we talk about the importance of operational safety within the warehouse environment, and of course, a lot of that is to do with the safety of the machines that operate within that, primarily forklift trucks. So, what's UKMHA doing on that side of things?
So we're very fortunate. We're way ahead of the game. We, some 20 odd years ago, maybe longer than that, we launched a business in collaboration between BITA, FLTA, and with input from the HSE. A business called CFTS Limited, which is Consolidated Fork Truck Services. And that was really born out of the necessity to raise standards when it came to the frequency and the thoroughness of when people were examining workplace equipment. Prior to that, there was no real set rules, so we put in a lot of advice and regulation alongside the HSE to make sure that trucks are examined on an annual basis. So there has to be the equivalent of an MOT for a forklift truck at least once a year, and then dependent on usage or the environment that truck works in, that thorough examination could be every 6 months, and in some cases it should be every 3 months if it's something like a Moffat or a high-ab mounted truck on the back of a lorry, because of the environment that it's continuously working in. CFTS does a lot around the governance of thorough examination. So for us, that thorough examination should not only take into account the lower aspects of the machinery, but also the pure. Why would you just test the lifting gear on a forklift truck if you're not testing the brakes, the tyres and the steering column? It makes no sense to any of us that you've got a machine that can potentially be deadly if its brakes aren't working, but it's got perfectly fine and past the loader side of things. So for us, we take a very whole view of the machine, make sure that it's working correctly. And our primary task is to bring those engineers that are carrying out their examinations to make sure that they are competent to do so, and that they are aware of any rules and regulations and changes that come through from government or HSE that they should be adhering to.
So how do you do that? Through training modules?
Yeah, so it's a training module. So competent engineers come and get trained every 5 years, and then we're in regular contact with them across that period of time. We have just launched, and when I say just launched, the latest rollout has been on Monday, a new app for engineers to use. So rather than the paper-based version that's been in existence for the last 20 years, we're moving more into a digital sphere. So you can carry out your thorough examinations on a tablet, on a laptop, or on your phone, which the engineers that are going down that route are loving it, because it's just simplifying things, and it keeps a digital passport record for the vehicle that you've inspected. So it's a real game changer for us, and there's a lot of information that can be found on the CFTS Thorough Examination website.
Well, sounds like coming bang up to date with that. I've seen you all over social media standing in an empty industrial unit. That's the kind of scrolling I do in my spare time. So what's that all about? What were you doing there, Rob?
So one of the ambitions of UKMHA was really to look at having its own facility based in the Midlands, so we could connect with members from right across the country. It was a bit of a mission. I won't lie about that. It felt like looking for a needle in a haystack at one point, but we came across the right size of property with the right parking allocation, because we want to use that as our technical training hub. So we had to have the ability to park up at least 12 service vehicles, which we've managed to secure a property that fits that blueprint for us. We've got about 8,500 square foot to play with. So part of that is going to be office space, and we'll be moving the UKMHA and CFTS operations into Kibworth, which is in Leicestershire, from June onwards this year. We're at the exciting fit-out stage at the moment, so mezzanines go in this week. I'm up there on Friday myself this week just to go through sort of the progress. And then the other half is going to be our technical training area, which is really exciting. So bringing the training that we provide for forklift truck technicians and service engineers in-house, and taking control of our own destiny. And another bit of breaking news, which I'll share exclusively with you, is we've appointed our first head of learning and development, who is going to be joining us on March the 16th. I can't quite reveal the name yet, but that will come out in due course. But it's a really exciting development as we supercharge our aspirations and what we can deliver around safety for the technicians within our industry.
Well, you almost heard it here first with that little tease. I have to say then, this sounds like a strong commitment from your side towards training, but particularly you're really placing a high value on the role of the service engineer within our industry.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think there's I can't remember how many meals it is between total chaos if the logistics industry were to fail and shut down overnight. Well, the key pinch point on that is if forklift trucks aren't working, nothing gets moved. So service engineers have a lot of responsibility, and for a lot of operations now, it's very much 24/7. So if a critical piece of equipment goes down, that can have large implications across the whole of that business. So the service engineer is a really important part of that, keeping that system going. A lot of businesses, they see the service engineer more than they would see the managing director, the ops director, or even the sales guys for that business. So they really are that forefront, that real sort of focal point for the customer. They are ambassadors, yeah, definitely. And it's interesting to see sort of how businesses have changed their approach to servicing, that it becomes more than just a necessity. It's more of a service. It's more about preventative and making sure that the equipment is fit for purpose for as long as possible.
I always remember the FLTA talking about this, campaigning about this some while back, about the attraction of the role of a service engineer as a valuable career choice. They made that comparison. We put our forklift truck engineers, or we put our engineers through college, and they come out with the technical skills, and that their heads are turned by the automotive industry. BMW's there with their shiny with their shiny workshops and their clean white overalls. But all they're doing there is literally unbolting engines and sending off to Germany. Whereas on the other side, on our side, the exciting side, they're autonomous, they're in vans, they'll have their own service van, they're traveling from customer to customer. There's a lot of interface there between human beings, and every job is different. You don't really know what's going to happen when you arrive at on site at a customer. To me, that sounds like a much better choice than putting car engines in crates.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think having been to the college at Stevenson's in Colville and talking to apprentice engineers, that's one of the things that really appeals to them is that variety and not knowing from day to day what are the problems that you're going to have to solve. I think there's a lot of unique skills that we're looking for in our industry. And it's interesting, we're seeing a flow from other industries like automotive where it's not as challenging and they're seeing sort of what we can do or what's expected of service engineers and technicians in our industry as a lot more engaging and a lot more in depth. I think also with the nature of some of the businesses in our sector, for the right person with the right application, the world is literally your oyster. You've got transferable skills that mean you could work in virtually any country in the world. And these are all global players as well. So it's a really exciting career to enter into. And let's not forget, if you're going down the apprenticeship route, well, you're earning while you're learning. So you're learning while you're on the job, but you're still bringing in a wage. That's a really important factor for a lot of the young people that are coming into our sector. There's an awful lot of more work that we can do around diversity and inclusion. And from the association's perspective, we took the opportunity last year to interview 3 female leaders within our sector. And again, it's a case of shining a light on those leading examples and talking to them about their career pathways and what got them into the sector to start with and what advice they would impart for any new young person who wants to come into the materials handling and intralogistics industries.
Yes, it's always been the case, hasn't it, that people get into the industry by accident, and once they do, it's really hard to get out again. It's a rewarding and fulfilling sector to be working in, and I imagine that also for a service engineer. You and I, we've grown wrinkles since we first started off in this sector, but way back then, service engineers were probably mainly working on ICE engined forklift trucks in probably not very comfortable conditions. Now today, of course, it's a very sophisticated sector with all the bells and whistles and the plug-in laptops that come with working out how a modern forklift truck works and how to keep it working. It sounds very challenging and rewarding.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think sort of the level of technology that we now see embedded into forklift trucks is second to none. The next part of the journey is the autonomous trucks, which are still going to need servicing, even though they're not driven by human beings, which probably means they don't get as many dinks and nicks that they probably do currently, but they will still need regular servicing on a quarterly basis, as you would do with a normal standard forklift truck. And then the annual thorough examination will still need to be taken, to be held when the schedule demands that it happens.
Is the industry managing to address the need to bring down the average age of the service engineer? Are we attracting enough new talent?
Yeah, I mean, it's a perennial problem. It's one that's been within the sector for as long as I've been in there. People are always saying, look, we need to find a way to get younger talent into this industry. I think one of the real barriers and one of the hurdles to overcome is to try and get educators to actually think about the logistics industry and also the intralogistics servicing side of the industry. The average teacher has a very dim view of what happens within a warehouse, and I just wish that we could encourage more of them to go and look at some of the fabulous facilities that you drive past whichever motorway you're going up and down. And within those facilities, you've got a lot of automation, you've got a lot of sophisticated equipment, but you also have a lot of materials handling equipment that's working alongside and in harmony with this. And it's really changing the hearts and minds of people, that point where they're really thinking about, okay, what do I do after going through the school education system when they're hitting that 15, 16, 17-year-old age before they start thinking about whether it's an apprenticeship route or whether they want to go into sort of university.
Yeah, we are always banging the drum, and we always have done, haven't we, for careers in the industry. And I totally agree. When you drive past these sheds, they are sheds. They look like not particularly interesting grey buildings most of the time, and then as soon as you roll the doors up, it's just like, wow, look at all that tech. It's a very cutting edge sector, and it's kind of perhaps we're not very good at shouting about that.
Yeah, no, and I think one of the most fascinating visits that I did when I was working on IMHX and SHD was a guided tour by John Manully of John Lewis around the facility there shortly after it opened, and
up in Milton Keynes.
It was phenomenal what was going on there, and it's sort of, you forget how many variants of a school uniform that are going to be needed across the country, how many different colour blazers, blouses and shirts and shorts, and there it is all working in harmony, all somehow arriving at the right point of packing, and yeah, it's the complexity and the problem solving that goes on, and a lot of these places are looking for data scientists now as much as they are for the
Mhm.
warehouse operatives. So it's a very sophisticated sector.
Yeah, it's magic. I think that's what the answer is.
Yeah,
That's how they do that. And again, that warehouse that you told us about there in Milton Keynes for Waitrose. Oh, sorry, was it John Lewis?
John Lewis. Yeah,
I remember the challenge there was to, on the one hand, you've got somebody ordering a stick of lipstick, and on the other hand, you've got somebody ordering a mattress for a double bed.
yep,
Try find a bit of technology that can handle that and that. I think we're still working on how to get there. Still got a long way to go. We're not there yet.
yeah. And the other big equation for a lot of those online retailers is how do you handle returns? You know, we ran a competition at IMHX in 2019, which was really focused around trying to get young people engaged with the industry. And the problem with returns is that typically there's 7 touch points before it gets restocked and resold. And then,
Mm.
you know, you even with apparel, with high fashion, you have people making sure that the returns haven't been worn. So it's that human interaction. And obviously, if you've got 7 pairs of hands before the item gets restocked, that's a lot of cost that you're adding in to that distribution channel.
Yeah. So we talk about some of the automation within the inside of a warehouse. How is UKMHA staying relevant in this changing world where perhaps forklift trucks aren't the kingpin that they once used to be?
A really good question. I think the interesting trend is if you look at some of the larger OEMs, they've all been acquiring automation businesses, and that we're starting to see is becoming more and more embedded and more harmonious. From an association viewpoint, our sweet spot has always been and always will be the forklift truck. That will be the centerpiece. But it's the automation that's now going on within that forklift truck, whether it be an AG, whether it's an autonomous forklift truck that's working without a driver. So, yeah, we have to keep a pace with the demands of our industry and the demands of the sector. And that's nothing new. That's been in place for many decades. And it's just continuously looking at what are the opportunities, but also what are the risks that come with this as well. Because, as we know, materials handling does come with some form of risk. And it's about managing and mitigating those risks as best as possible.
And of course, you're always banging the drum for not only the UK members of your organisation, but also the UK logistics industry as a whole. For example, I was talking to David Goss, who's your technical manager, just earlier today, and he was in Germany working on some wording, shall we say, because it kind of left things open to interpretation. And engineers, and particularly those whose responsibilities are health and safety, they don't like things being open to interpretation. So it was good to see that he was out there. In this case, it was around the use of seatbelts and forklift trucks.
Yep.
We sent a delegation to the EU to campaign on the benefit of the UK warehousing industry on this point. And I guess that answers the question, how do you stay relevant? Because stuff like that's coming up all the time, and we need somebody to look after that for us.
Yeah, and it's very much being front and centre of that conversation, which is something which UKMHA and previously BITA were incredibly good at doing. David is a fantastic asset to UKMHA. He's readily available for members when it comes to technical issues. I've never worked with somebody who has such a broad depth of knowledge and has a laser focus on that knowledge as well. So I'm not going to step on his toes too much or say something that I shouldn't do because I'm always getting pulled up for that. But yeah, the really breaking news today is that that UK government has announced that we will be continuing to recognise the CE marking for imports into the UK, which is fantastic news because it takes out that degree of uncertainty and the nightmare of having to comply with not only CE regulations but UK CA regulations. So that really gives some transparency and also helps future planning for businesses because I'm sure there must have been businesses out there that were thinking, well, do you know what? Do we really want to have 2 sets of standards, one for Europe, one for the UK, and how important and how big is the UK market? Well, that just takes that all off the table. And then David's currently working on the legislation with UK government for the adoption of the machinery directive. So that again is something which we are heavily involved in, a lot of lobbying, and we want to see some common sense around the application of seatbelts in particular is one issue that we're tackling at the moment. And we'll come to conclusion with that, and hopefully it will be the right one for our sector.
The thought of, for example, a forklift truck manufacturer having to make a product specifically to suit the regulations of a very, in the global scheme of things, a very small market, which is the UK, it would also, and the price increases and the costs that would be associated with that. There's a UKMHA showing its relevance to the UK logistics industry in one sentence, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's part of my role is to make sure that our members recognise the value of what we're doing in the background. A lot of this goes unsung. People don't get to hear about it on a day-to-day basis, but it is happening. We are there around the table with government and the HSE, pushing the agenda for our industry and the best interests for our sector. And at the end of the day, we are the guys at the sharp end. Our manufacturers, our members are the ones that are continuously running and evolving machinery, and they understand it inherently better than most lawmakers, if I were to be so presumptuous as to say that.
Let's hope that today's episode of Logistics Business Conversations is part of that campaign to spread the message of the good work that the UKMHA is doing, not just for its members, but for the industry as a whole. Rob, thanks for joining me very much indeed for this edition of Logistics Business Conversations. And thanks also to you, the listener, for joining us today. Wherever you get your podcasts from, please subscribe to us at Logistics Business Conversations to make sure the next edition is delivered straight to you as soon as it's released. Until then, it's goodbye from Rob Fisher.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me, Peter MacLeod. Goodbye.